This is Yazin. Welcome to the first ever episode of One Bite, where we take complicated stuff and break it down one bite at a time. Now, in this first episode, I was looking over at Dribble and I found this amazing little design. It just looks so simple and I loved it. But one thing I found particularly interesting, this little play button over at the bottom. So this is an onboarding slides demo, and this button has an indicator which goes from the top all the way around. And if the user doesn't click on the button in that time period, it automatically transitions to the next slide. And I just thought this would be amazing to implement in Flutter. So if you're interested to learn how I built this in Flutter from scratch, tune in. All right, so we start where most Flutter projects start, in main.dart. This is a standard project. I just got started. The only difference is that I swapped out the main page, the counter crap, for our own main page, which is just a stateful widget at this point with an empty scaffold. I also updated pubspec YAML to include the assets directory, and within assets I just have the 3 hero images as well as an arrow SVG. So hero 1, 2, and 3, as well as that arrow SVG there at the bottom. So let's get started. Within our scaffold, we're going to be working within container. And I always like wrapping container with a safe area. So that way we don't get bogged down by the various device sizes and make sure that everything gets displayed properly. So within the container, we're going to have a child, and within that child, we're going to use the PageView widget. The PageView widget allows you to scroll between various slides. If you've heard about it before, then you know that it's kind of like the default component that most people use to create those sliding screens. I'll show you how it works with some simple container widgets that just have text children. So you can see I have slides 1, 2, and 3. When I do that, now I can slide between the various slides. It's pretty cool. PageView also has a controller, which is a PageView controller. And so this is actually why I'm using a stateful widget. We set up the page controller right at the very top, and then we can use it to control the transition between various pages. Now, also one more thing, depending on how you want to implement this, if you don't want the user to manually scroll between the various slides, you can prevent that using scroll physics. So you can specify never scrollable scroll physics. That's what it's called. So now, I can't scroll between the various pages. And I can also set up the initial page to 0. This is the index within the children array. So now that we've got that set up, we can set up the actual slides to match this design that we have over here. So I'm going to go ahead and replace out the text with, yep, you guessed it, a column, and within that we're going to have essentially, which is like a hero widget that's going to be an image. So this could be image.asset hero-1.png, and so that shows that. Then we'll set up some padding, because you notice there's some space between the image and all of these various components. So we can set up a padding to help us get that. And also you want to make sure that the text doesn't brush up against the corner of the devices, just so it's nice and spaced out. All right, so set the padding. We'll go with edge inset style. Maybe 20 will look pretty good. And within our padding, we're gonna have another column with a bunch more children. At this point, we're at grandchildren. All right, then within that, we're gonna have some text. That would be our title. And then we'd have more text, subtitle. And between the text, the header and the subtitle, you're probably gonna have a sized box. If you want to create space, you can use a size box with whatever height you set. So I'm going to set height 20 because the space right here, or rather the space between this and the subtitle. And you have a slightly larger space between that and the button, so probably somewhere around maybe 35. And then obviously you have the button. I'm just going to leave that empty for now. All right, to save that, let's put in our text, boost your traffic. Boost your traffic. Outreach to many social networks to improve your statistics. Not the best copywriting work in the whole world. At least the design's pretty cool. All right, so the styling looks like utter crap. And so to fix that, what people typically tend to do is you define some sort of style and you assign it to the text subtitle style. And you go to the top of the page and you just define these styles right here. So title style, for instance, could be equal to text style. Obviously you're going to have a large font size and then maybe assign it a color as well. You can get the actual color using a color picker, but for now I think that color is this hex value, and just make sure that's font weight bold. Alright, so that's your title style. We could do the same for your subtitle. Alright, the color is going to be slightly different. It's going to be 88869F. If you're wondering, yeah, of course I've memorized these by heart. Alright, so much better. Definitely much better. The only difference I would make is that you want to make sure this is aligned to the center, because I'm pretty sure text align needs to be centered there. Alright, so it looks much better. Alright, definitely looks better. And then we've got a bit of space for the button, and then skip right there at the very bottom. Cool. And so next, what do we need to do? So what I want to do is, since you want this bottom to get lined up exactly right, so you can see we have an expanded widget, we have padding, and within padding you have a column. So outside of the padding itself is where we're going to set our text. We're going to have a button, so obviously here you're going to have some button. I'm just going to set a container with color is now red, just so we can see it here. Maybe a height of 40. It's definitely going to be more than 40. Alright, so about 60, and then at the bottom we're going to have the skip text, right? So here I have text skip. Maybe you could use the subtitle style. Alright, looks good. But I also had a sized box at the bottom. Cool. Yeah, it looks much better. Alright, so now we just have to add the button, the cool little button that we were talking about earlier. Now what we're going to do is extract this container into its own widget, just so that we can create the remaining slides. So I'm just going to call this slide, and for each one of these slides, we're going to be passing a hero, which is essentially an image asset. We'll pass in the text as well. Subtitle. Oh my gosh, I forgot how to type. And then finally, we're also going to have some sort of method for what happens next. Essentially, call it a next page, which I haven't defined yet. We're going to be defining that method. So that's what it's going to look like, and I'd like to do this for all three of them. Now we can come back to slide here at the bottom and add all of these properties. So we have a hero widget, we have a string for the title and subtitles, and then we have this is called a void callback for the on next. And so we need to pass these to each of the elements in the constructor. So we'll pass the subtitle and title as well as on next. So that covers that. That should fix all of these issues. And then we just need to make sure that we're referencing them here. So you replace that with hero. Replace your text with title. And that's going to be subtitle. And then finally, at the bottom, we're going to have skip. We're going to use on next. So we'll wire in on next. Essentially what we want to do is wrap this with a gesture detector until when the user clicks on tap, you want to hit on next. That's what we want to do. So I think that's pretty much it. We haven't defined next page yet, but before I do that, let me just go ahead and create the other slides. So that's the 3 slides. And for the last slide, I could just basically put center with a text widget that just says, be kind to yourself. And kind of like a fun little message that we can share. This will just show up at the very end. So after you scroll through or you've gone through all of the slides, you're just going to get a message at the end. And so that's just like a nice transition there. Now to define next page, and we can do that here. So next page is going to be a void method. And here, essentially what we want to do, I have to respelled page properly, is hit the page controller, and it already has a next page method. It accepts a duration, and we can set whatever we want. I'm going to set, I think 200 milliseconds would be sufficient. And then under curve, you can define whichever curve you like. I'm going to use curves.ease. I think that'd be fine. So that's it. That defines our next page. It also defines our container and everything else. And so we can now update the remaining slides just to match the design that we have. So give the best solution. This copywriting is utterly horrible. We will give best solution for your business issues. Issues. Oh, the spelling is wrong. I don't know why I just imagine a Russian person having written this. Reach the target. With our help, it will be easier to reach target. Oh, I don't mean to insult any Russian listeners. I'm just trying to make an otherwise somewhat boring exercise become a bit more fun. You know, typing is not what we all came out here to watch. Anyway, so that hits the third one. We'll give best solution for your business issues, and with our help, it will be easier. Yeah, I think that covers everything. And so now you'll notice that when I don't think a refresh was even necessary, but if I hit skip, then I'm able to get to the final page. And so the only thing that remains is actually implementing this slide thing at the bottom. So the actual button, the fun part, basically. So now what we'll do is we'll replace this container with the actual button. And so to do this, we can just create a new widget called progress button. The only parameter this would take is the on next parameter. This would be a stateless widget called progress button. And once more, we'll set up the void callback and pass it to the constructor. Alright, so there we go. That should be ready. And then once more, this is just going to be container color red. I think height was 60. Alright, so that's showing up as expected. It's still working. Now, for this actual part, what I'm going to do is there's going to be, in my mind, I see there's going to be two parts to this. There's going to be the actual button here in the middle. This is just a traditional button, it's pretty quick to do. And then you'd have the animated indicator itself. This is where the animation needs to exist. And so we'll create this simple button now. We'll create a stack and place a simple button within it, and then have the animated indicator on top of that. So I think replacing the container with a sized box here would make a lot of sense, because really you want to fix the height, you want to fix the width, and you just want to button all that down. Then you're going to have a stack with children, and this is the part where we define the traditional button. And that's just going to be like a center with a gesture detector that handles the on-tap method. We'll have a container within that with a height that's slightly smaller than the 75, so maybe 60. And then we'll have the arrow within that container. So we're going to have SPG picture dot asset, and then that's just going to point to our arrow, and maybe also just give it a width of say 10 pixels. So SVG picture is not defined. Let's go ahead and import that. Alright, so SVG picture is not defined. Did I not add this to PubSpec? Let me go ahead and do that. So just make sure you add Flutter SVG 0.9, 0.0. Right, so now that we've imported the picture, we should be able to see if we can show up. Let's go ahead and finish up the decoration for the container that we have here. That's where we're going to set the background color. That's just going to be our blue, and border radius needs to be fully rounded. So just put a large value, like 99. Blue is not defined. Blue is the color that we pick up. We can just set that over here. That's just going to be FF 4781FF. Alright, there we go. So that's that button there at the bottom, and you'll notice that, okay, so we hadn't added the on tap. You just need to do on tap, which would just go to on next. So that's going to work. Yeah, you're going to be able to proceed between slides that way. So that works fine. And now the only thing that remains is actually adding the animated indicator within the stack. So once more, I think it'd be useful here to actually create a separate widget for this. So I'm just going to create an animated indicator, or before that, we could just go ahead and create a folder called widgets. Then create a file called animated indicator.dart. So this is going to be a stateful widget called animated indicator. And it's here that we're going to also import material. Alright, and it's actually here that we're going to be implementing all of the animation related to, well, the indicator. So yeah. Now, just sort of off the top of my head, I know we're going to need a few things. So we're definitely going to need a duration. This will indicate how long that indicator will last. We're also going to need a size, and we'll need the onNext callback. And this basically tells it what happens when the timer is out. So once more, we're going to go back here and we're going to define these three parameters. So you're going to have duration, you're going to have the size, we can just make that a double, and a void callback for callback. And we'll just go ahead and specify that here. There we go. So that takes care of that, and I think at this point we have the fundamentals in place. The only thing left is to actually implement this animated indicator. So this is going to be the fun part. Let's head over to animated indicator, and the first thing we need to do is we already know that we're going to need to have. Let's take a look at this. You're going to need to have some sort of custom painter to be able to paint this path. And really what we're looking at here is an arc plus a circle. That's what this shape is all about. You have an arc going from the top, from 0 degrees, all the way up to potentially 360. And you have a circle that kind of rides along on the circumference of that path. So now that we know what we're going to do and we have an idea for how we're going to do it, let's get started. What I'm going to do is use a custom paint widget, and you'd be familiar with this if you've ever done any sort of drawing within Flutter. I passed a custom widget the size double. And you also need to pass it a painter, and for that I'm just going to create a new class called progress painter and provide it with a value, and this value would be anything from 0 to 100, and the idea is that this progress painter would basically display that value, and I think we could make this a double. So now we need to define progress painter, and the way this works is a painter is essentially an extension of a custom painter, and you need to define a method called paint. So void paint, that's going to take a canvas, and it's going to take a size. So now for progress painter, we also need to specify the value, and so that's what I'm going to do here. We're going to have progress painter and pass this dot progress. So that's what this value is that we're providing over here. So you'll notice that we still haven't implemented the method should repaint. That also is a required method. So here we can go ahead and do that. Should repaint. And in our case, we're just going to always return true. All right. Hey, where'd our paint method go? Let's go back and define that. All right, cool. And so on the paint side, we're gonna start with the arc, and I'm just gonna create a paint. And provide it with the values. So you want to set the style as painting style dot stroke. Set the width and set the color. That's going to be our blue. So blue is not defined. Let's go ahead and define that. We're just going to copy it from here. All right, so that's defined. So that's it. And we're also going to need a circle painter. So that's what we're going to use to paint this circle at the end. So I'm just going to call that circle paint. Same thing, we're going to use paint. And the style of this time is going to be a fill. And the color is also that same shade of blue. Now, you need to convert the progress that we have, which is between 0 and 100. We need to convert that into radians. And the radians is a measure of an angle. So essentially it's like saying angle. So that's going to be progress over 100. And we're just going to multiply that by pi. And pi is obviously not defined. We need to import the math library to get that. And then finally, at this point, we're ready. All we need to do is draw the shape. And I'm going to define a method called draw shape, where we pass the canvas, the two painters, and the starting position. So we said we want to start from the very top over here. So that's actually pi over 2, minus pi over 2. It typically starts from the bottom. So going minus pi over 2 gives you the correct starting point. We pass the angle as well as the size, and we're done. So let's go ahead and define draw shape. And it just takes a bunch of these parameters. We're going to take the canvas, line paint, circle paint. There's the start, let's just call it start radian, and sweep radian, as well as size. Alright, so this part is going to get a bit tricky, especially if you haven't done this sort of thing before. When you're going to draw an arc, you need to determine where the center of that arc is going to be. And that's what I'm doing over here. I'm specifying the center Y and the center X. And once you've done that, okay, let me just hide that part. It's blocking the view. Alright, and then we want to set the offset. And that's essentially an offset object with our two center values. And then we want to set the radius, of course. And that's just going to be the smaller of the width and the height. Over 2 because width is diameter. Alright, so at this point we're ready to draw. So we call the draw arc method. It expects to receive a rectangle, and we can pass a rectangle from a circle where the offset is the offset that we set already, and radius is the radius value that we've already set. We're going to pass start radian here, sweep radian here, and then false for use center because we don't want it to paint in the center, and then the painter as well. So that's it. That should actually draw our arc. And so if I were to save, you can see that the arc is now drawn properly, and I can change the value. So you can make this 10, you can make this 100, and it would draw properly. Pretty cool, huh? So you get a value between, let me just set it at 15. So you get a value between 0 and 100, and that gets properly drawn as an arc. Now, I did say earlier that it's not just the arc, we also need to draw that circle at the end. And so this part gets a bit tricky because you need to rely a little bit on math. And thankfully, I'm going to show you exactly how that works. So here we're going to use, so what we're trying to do here is find the X and Y positions of that circle that we're going to draw. And really this is, so it's really straightforward if you know what you're doing. There's a video that kind of explains how this cycle kind of works. I'm going to show you real quick. So basically, if you're trying to find the X position, then you're going to use sine, and if you're trying to find the Y position, you're going to be using cosine. So we'll use Y is radius multiplied by 1 minus cosine sweep radian. That's how you find it. It's a bit of math, but this video kind of explains how that thinking works, how you're able to find, using just the radius and the angle, both the X and Y components, so that you can properly find the position of the circle. Now, I will note that this is not sin, and this is not cos. It's called sine and cosine for you non-math friendly people out there. Sin cos. It almost sounds Spanish. Sin cos. It does sound like a Spanish word. If I'm not mistaken, maybe it's actually Spanish, who knows. It's the same thing as before. We're going to draw the offset, so create an offset, and then this time we're going to draw, there's a draw circle. You can see there's a bunch of methods, it's pretty straightforward. We're going to provide the circle offset, we already have the radius, and then you have circle paint there as well. Hit save, and there you go. Of course, I'm not going to provide the actual radius. You need to provide something much smaller, maybe 5. Yeah, I think 5 is about right. So you can see that it's working properly. And so now if I were to change the value to say 25, that's what it looks like at 25% progress. Say 40, that's what 40 looks like. So pretty cool. We've got the most complicated part. This was actually the trickiest part. And so we've already taken care of the trickiest part of this entire endeavor. So time now to add some, you guessed it, some animation. And so if this is new to you, I'm going to be going through all the steps anyway, so don't worry about it. First thing is we need to extend the state to include a ticker provider state mixin, and this allows us to access a ticker that we can use to control animations. Then what we're going to do is create an animation object. This I'm just going to call animation, and we also need an animation controller. I'm just going to call this, well, controller. Now we need to initialize these values, and that we do at init state. We'll set up the controller to the animation controller, and you need to pass it a duration, and then also this parameter called vsync this, just so it has a handle on this object. For animation, you're going to set the beginning and the end. So in our case, we have a beginning. Why did I write tweet? That's ridiculous. Tweet. And then you call the animate method, passing in the controller. So pretty straightforward. I mean, it does kind of look complicated, but it's actually pretty straightforward. What we want to make sure we do is you add a listener, and just call set state when you've done this. You can also add a status listener so just on the same object, add status listener. And this allows us to handle status changes. So like when the animation is completed, then you want to make sure that you reset things. So return the animation to what it was like. And also, very importantly, call the callback, right? And so that's what we're doing over here. Is there anything else that I need to do? Oh, and finally, you also need to call controller.forward. So that just starts the animation. So don't forget to add a dispose method, disposing the controller. And let's see, the final step to all this is actually controlling the build, right? And so for that, we use this animated build controller, animated builder, passing in the animation. And then we control what gets rendered using a builder. Here we're just going to return the same custom paint that we had earlier. So we're going to put that within the builder. And yeah, let's see. Yeah, make sure there. I'm returning that. So custom paint, passing in the widget size, progress painter. We're not going to hard code 40. You're going to use the animation value. And so I think that pretty much covers things. Yeah, we need to go back to main and just make sure that animation control, animated indicator, we're passing in a duration of 10, a size of 75. I can't really see what error message we're getting. Flutter SVG. No, that's not it. Alright, so let's restart that. Oh, there we go. Check it out. Check it out. It's actually working. So the indicator is actually changing properly. It's kind of a bit laggy on that first one, but it seems a bit smoother now. I think 10 seconds might be too much, but it kind of works. I mean, you need to give them time to read the crappy copywriting that we have up here. Anyway, so at this point, the button is working, the animation is working, and we automatically transition from one slide to the next. If you like this video, then make sure to hit subscribe. I'll be publishing way more videos. This is the first ever video. If you have any feedback for me, definitely let me know in the comments below. And if you have any ideas for things that you'd like me to build, just let me know, and I'll be sure to work on them. Until then, I'll see you in the next video. Adios.